My wife showed up at my tournament wearing another man's shirt. She doesn't know I'm competing. My wife Carla always told me that gaming was pathetic, that it was for losers with no future. So for 2 years I've been lying to her, telling her I was doing night shifts at a warehouse, when the truth is I was going to a friend's house, training and competing in gaming tournaments. I know how this sounds, but you need to understand. I genuinely thought she would leave me if she found out, but I swore that this time, after this tournament, I would take her to a fancy place and tell her I loved her and that I loved gaming. The night before I told my wife I had work and would be out all night. She smiled at me. No problem. I'll be away this weekend at a spa with my sister anyway. However, 5 minutes ago, I just saw her walk into the gaming venue and sit in the crowd. My mind instantly started racing as I sat in my gaming chair. She knew my secret, and I was doomed. But then I saw the smile on her face and thought that maybe she had come here to support me. Maybe she wasn't as against gaming as I thought, and this made me feel warm inside. But just before the match started, I saw her put on a shirt, the enemy team's shirt, and felt my heart drop in my stomach. I winced every time she shouted things like "Come on, love, you can do it," acting all passionate toward my rival. My focus was instantly destroyed. I started missing shots I normally wouldn't miss. I wasn't communicating with my team at all, and it didn't take long for the enemy team to completely dominate us. My teammates called a timeout the moment they noticed I was completely out of the game. "Dude, what's wrong with you?" asked my teammate Pedro. I couldn't answer. I kept looking at Carla in the crowd as she looked lovingly at the other guy, blowing kisses at him, something she never did for me. My team got more frustrated the more we started falling behind. When our opponents were 4 points from winning, my team called a second timeout. This time Pedro followed my gaze and saw me watching a woman. "Are you really going to sit here and get distracted by some girl?" he complained. I replied quietly, "That's my wife." The whole team went silent. They looked at me, then at her, then at the scoreboard. I could see it making sense to them. They realized I wasn't just playing badly. I was emotionally destroyed by the person who should be supporting me most. Without saying anything more, my teammates rallied around me. One of them clapped his hand on my back and said, "Let's crush them." 3 simple words that woke me up. Instantly, we regrouped and started developing completely new strategies, refusing to give up without a fight. We came back hungry for victory, more determined than ever. We played unpredictably aggressively while I channeled all the pain into focus. The enemy score didn't move for almost half an hour, and at some point we were finally tied. Carla had gone quiet. Other fans around her sat motionless, too shocked to cheer. And then we won. The moment I took down the final guy, I felt tears instantly well up. My whole team screamed, pulling my shirt, but I just pulled them all into a hug. When the victory ceremony started, I stood on stage looking at Carla as I made my speech. I'm grateful my team supported me when my wife didn't. She completely froze when the cameras searched the crowd and put her face on the big screen for everyone to see. She panicked and ducked down, snaking through the crowd to exit. That's when her secret boyfriend from the enemy team yelled to me, "Wait, that's your wife?" She told me she was single. "Yeah, well, she told me she hated gaming," I said, disappointed. The crowd quickly understood what happened, that my wife came to the tournament wearing an enemy team shirt, cheering against her own husband during the whole match. And they didn't like it one bit. People started booing her, throwing popcorn and drink over her head as she tried to escape. But when she reached the exit, the crowd blocked her. That's when she lost control, screaming at me that I was also a liar. "You should be at work." I lied, worried you would leave me. "You simply cheated. What's your excuse?" It was just once, she argued. But as soon as she said that, a guy in the audience stood up looking completely devastated and shouted, "You told me you were dating me too at the last tournament." All eyes turned to her to see what she would say next. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. Her face went from pale to red as hundreds of people stared at her waiting for an explanation. The second guy who claimed she was dating him stood there with arms crossed, looking betrayed and irritated. Carla finally stammered something about it being a misunderstanding, but her voice was too low and shaky for most people to hear. Someone near her yelled for her to speak louder. She tried again, louder this time, saying the second guy was just a friend and he misinterpreted their relationship. The crowd didn't buy it. People started shouting questions at her, asking how many guys she was dating and if she had any shame. I stood frozen on stage, gripping the trophy so tight my knuckles turned white. My teammates had their hands on my shoulders, trying to keep me stable as the whole venue watched this nightmare unfold. The big screen still showed Carla's face, magnified enormously for everyone to see. She looked around desperately for an escape route, but the crowd had cornered her near the exit. Security in yellow vests started pushing through the crowd toward her. The venue staff looked stressed and confused about how to handle the situation. My rival from the enemy team stood near his teammates looking shocked and hurt. He kept shaking his head like he couldn't believe what was happening. Pedro squeezed my shoulder and whispered in my ear that we should get off stage before this got worse. I nodded, but my legs felt heavy and strange. The host tried to regain control, thanking everyone for coming and saying the ceremony was over. Nobody paid attention to him. All eyes remained on Carla as security finally reached her and started clearing a path. She lowered her head and let them guide her to a side exit away from the main doors. The crowd parted reluctantly as security pushed through with Carla between them. People kept yelling things at her, but the guards blocked anyone who got too close. I watched her disappear through a door marked staff only. The moment she was gone, the crowd's attention turned back to me on stage. Phones pointed in my direction now. People started recording videos and taking photos. The murmurs got louder as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. My teammates surrounded me and started moving me toward the backstage area. Pedro had his hand on my back guiding me while another teammate grabbed my equipment bag. The walk off stage felt like forever, even though it was probably only 30 seconds. Reporters tried to shout questions at me, but my teammates formed a wall and kept them away. We pushed through a heavy door into a hallway behind the stage. The noise from the venue became muffled. My ears were ringing and my chest felt tight. One of my teammates asked if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. We kept walking until we reached the locker room area. It was a basic space with benches and lockers and fluorescent lights that hurt my eyes. My teammate sat me down on a bench, and someone handed me a water bottle. I stared at it in my hands without drinking. Pedro sat next to me without saying anything. The other guys hovered around asking questions I couldn't process. Someone said I played incredibly in the second half. Another person said not to worry about what just happened. Their voices blended into background noise. I sat there watching my hands shake as I held the water bottle. The cold plastic felt real, but everything else felt fake and distant. Pedro remained quiet beside me, which I was grateful for. I didn't want anyone trying to fix this or tell me it would be okay. The sounds from the venue filtered through the walls, muffled cheering and music as they probably started cleaning up. My breathing slowly got more normal. The tight feeling in my chest loosened a bit. A teammate sat on the bench across from me and said I should take my time. Another guy started packing up equipment, trying to give me space. I finally opened the water bottle and took a small sip. My throat was dry and the water helped. Pedro shifted beside me, but still didn't speak. I appreciated him just being there without making it weird. The locker room felt safe and quiet compared to the chaos outside. I knew I'd have to face everything eventually, but right now I just needed to breathe and process. My phone was in my bag, vibrating constantly. I could hear it buzzing against my equipment. Part of me wanted to check, but a bigger part knew it was Carla, and I wasn't ready for that. I took another sip of water and stared at the floor tiles. They were white with gray specks. I counted the specks on one tile then another, gave my brain something to focus on besides replaying what just happened. After sitting there for maybe 15 minutes, I stood up. My legs felt more solid now. I told Pedro I needed to pack my things and get out of here. He nodded and asked if I wanted him to drive me. I said yes without thinking about it. The idea of being alone in my car right now seemed impossible. My teammates started gathering their equipment too. Someone mentioned grabbing food, but nobody seemed hungry. We were all just going through the motions of post-tournament routine, even though nothing felt routine. I forced myself to focus on packing my bag, mouse, keyboard, headset, cables. Each item went into its place. The familiar actions helped ground me. Pedro stayed nearby, keeping an eye on me without being obvious about it. I zipped my bag and threw it over my shoulder. The trophy was on the bench where someone had placed it. I picked it up and looked at it. First place, we actually won. The victory felt hollow and strange now, but we won. My team pulled together when it mattered. I held on to that thought as we walked toward the exit. A tournament coordinator stopped us in the hallway. She looked stressed and apologetic, said I needed to do a quick interview for the broadcast. It was required by tournament rules. I wanted to say no, but Pedro gave me a look that said I should just get it over with. The coordinator led me to a small room set up with cameras and lights. A reporter was there with a microphone looking uncomfortable. I sat in the chair they indicated and tried to arrange my face into something normal. The lights felt hot on my skin. The reporter asked basic questions about the match and our comeback. I gave short answers about teamwork and maintaining focus under pressure. He asked what was going through my head during the final round. I said my team supported me, and that made all the difference. He seemed to want me to mention what happened with Carla, but I didn't take the bait. I kept my answers about the game and about being honest with people who matter. The reporter looked disappointed but didn't push. After maybe 5 minutes, they said we were done. I got up quickly and headed for the door. My face felt hot, and I knew it was probably red. Pedro was waiting in the hallway, and we walked quickly toward the exit. Other players and staff watched us pass. Some looked sympathetic, others curious. I kept my eyes forward and kept walking. We pushed through the back doors to the parking lot. The cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath. Pedro's car was parked near the back. We threw our equipment in the trunk and got in. He started the engine, but didn't pull out immediately. My phone had been vibrating the whole time we walked to the car. I finally pulled it out and looked at the screen. 23 missed calls from Carla, 37 text messages. I scrolled through the preview of the texts without opening them. The first ones asked where I was. Then they got angry saying I humiliated her. Then they shifted to saying we needed to talk. Then they went back to angry saying I had no right to kick her out of the venue. The messages kept coming even as I watched. Another text appeared asking why I wasn't responding. I felt my jaw tighten. Pedro looked over and asked if I was okay. I said I needed to silence my phone. I went into settings and put it on Do Not Disturb. Then I pushed it deep into my bag so I wouldn't be tempted to look again. Pedro asked if I wanted to grab food or just go to his place. I said his place. The idea of being in public at a restaurant seemed impossible. He nodded, and we pulled out of the parking lot. We drove in silence for a while. The streetlights passed outside. My brain kept replaying moments from the tournament. Seeing Carla in that shirt, her cheering for the other team, the look on her face when the big screen showed her, the second guy standing up, her trying to explain. Everything played on loop in my head. Pedro's apartment was small but clean. He cleared a space on his couch and got a blanket and pillow. He asked if I wanted to talk, but I shook my head. He said okay and told me to help myself to anything in the fridge. Then he went to his bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the couch still wearing my team shirt. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I pulled out my phone even though I knew I shouldn't. Do Not Disturb was still on, but I could see the notifications piling up. 52 texts from Carla now. I opened my messages and typed a text without reading hers. I said we needed to meet tomorrow at Campos Cafe at 2 p.m. I said she should stay somewhere else tonight. I hit send before I could rethink it. Her response came in less than a minute. She said I had no right to kick her out of our own apartment. She said it was my fault for lying about gaming. She said I was being cruel and unfair. I read the text feeling my anger grow. I typed back that we would talk tomorrow and left it at that. I turned my phone face down on the coffee table. The silence pressed around me. I lay on the couch and pulled the blanket over me. My body felt exhausted, but my brain wouldn't shut off. I stared at the ceiling in the dark. Pedro's apartment had these popcorn ceilings with little bumps and shadows. I traced patterns in the texture, trying to make my mind focus on something besides everything that had happened. My phone kept lighting up on the coffee table. Even though it was face down, I could see the glow through the crack. Each time it lit up, I knew it was another text from Carla. I forced myself not to look. The ceiling had a water stain in one corner shaped kind of like a cloud. I studied it and tried to breathe slowly. My chest still felt tight. My hands still felt shaky when I lifted them. The victory should have been amazing. We came back from being destroyed. We won, but instead I felt empty and sick. I rolled onto my side, facing the back of the couch. The fabric smelled like detergent. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but my brain kept racing. I thought about how Carla wore that shirt, how she cheered against me, how she looked at that other guy, how she blew kisses at him, things she never did for me. I thought about the 2 years of lying about gaming, telling her I was doing night shifts at a warehouse. The guilt mixed with anger mixed with pain until I couldn't separate them anymore. Hours passed. I knew it was hours because I kept checking my phone for the time without reading the messages. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Sleep never came. Around 3 a.m., I opened social media without thinking. It was a mistake. Clips from the tournament were everywhere. Someone had posted the full video of the ceremony, including Carla's face on the big screen. It already had thousands of views. The comments were brutal. People calling her names, people saying I deserved better, people making jokes, some people saying I was wrong for lying about gaming, others defending me. The whole thing had exploded into a debate about relationships and honesty. I saw my face in thumbnails and screenshots. I saw Carla's face. I saw the moment of confrontation captured from multiple angles. I closed the app, but the images remained burned in my mind. I put my phone on the floor so I couldn't reach it easily. I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to block everything out. My eyes burned from being open so long. My body ached from tension, but sleep still wouldn't come. I just lay there in the dark on Pedro's couch, replaying every moment and wondering how I missed all the signs that my wife was cheating on me. I woke around 6 a.m. with a stiff neck from Pedro's couch. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, feeling exhaustion settling into my bones. My phone was still on the floor where I'd left it. I picked it up and saw 83 messages from Carla now. I didn't open them. I stood up and folded the blanket Pedro had given me, placing it on the arm of the couch. My body felt heavy as I moved through the apartment. Pedro was still asleep in the bedroom with the door closed. I found my shoes by the door and put them on without tying the laces. I grabbed my keys and wallet from the coffee table. The morning air outside was cold and damp. I walked to my car parked on the street and got in. The engine started with a noise that echoed through the empty neighborhood. I drove toward the apartment I shared with Carla, knowing she wouldn't be there. She had texted last night saying she was staying at her sister's house. The drive took 15 minutes through streets that were mostly empty. I parked in my usual spot and sat in the car for a moment staring at the building. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough for my knuckles to turn white. I forced myself to get out and climb the stairs to the second floor. The hallway smelled like old carpet and someone's breakfast cooking. I unlocked and pushed the door open. The silence inside felt thick and wrong. I stepped in and closed the door behind me. The living room looked exactly like I'd left it 2 days ago. Carla's shoes were scattered near the couch. Her coffee mug was on the side table with a brown ring stained at the bottom. I walked toward the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. On the counter next to the sink was a canvas bag. The enemy team shirt was stuffed inside, crumpled and wrinkled. Her wallet was beside it along with her keys on the cat-shaped keychain. I walked closer and pulled the shirt from the bag. The fabric felt rough in my hands. I lifted it and stared at the logo printed on the chest. The number on the back was my rival's number. The confirmation hit me like a punch in the stomach. She really wore this. She really cheered against me while wearing another man's shirt. My hands started shaking as I let the shirt drop back into the bag. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. The apartment felt smaller, suddenly, like the walls were pressing in. I stood there for several minutes, just breathing. Then I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. I typed a message to Carla without reading any of hers. I said we needed to meet today at 2 p.m. at the cafe near campus. I said it had to be somewhere public. I hit send and pushed the phone back in my pocket. I didn't want to be in the apartment anymore. I grabbed some things from the bedroom, stuffing clothes into a backpack I found in the closet. I got my phone charger and toothbrush from the bathroom. Then I left and locked behind me. I went back to Pedro's apartment around 8 a.m. He was awake, now sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal. He looked up when I came in and nodded, but didn't ask questions. I left the backpack by the couch and sat down. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Carla had responded. She said 2 p.m. was fine, but wanted to know why I was being so dramatic. She said we could talk at home like normal people. I didn't respond. I put my phone face down on the coffee table. Pedro finished his cereal and took the bowl to the sink. He asked if I wanted breakfast, but I shook my head. I wasn't hungry. I spent the next few hours pacing around Pedro's apartment. I walked from the living room to the kitchen and back, rehearsed what I was going to say to Carla. I practiced the words out loud when Pedro went to shower. I tried different versions, different tones. Nothing felt right. At noon I showered and put on clean clothes. Pedro offered to drive me to the cafe, but I said I needed to walk. The fresh air might help clear my head. I left his apartment at 1:30 and walked the 20 minutes to campus. The cafe was on the corner of a busy street. It had big windows and small tables crowded together. I went in and ordered a black coffee I didn't really want. I sat at a table in the back where I could see the door. My leg bounced under the table as I waited. Carla showed up at 2:15. She walked in wearing sunglasses, even though it was cloudy outside. She saw me and walked over without ordering anything. She sat across from me and took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She folded her hands on the table and stared at me. I stared back. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The cafe was full of students studying and people with laptops. The noise around us felt distant. Finally, Carla spoke first. She said the whole thing had been a huge mistake and she didn't mean for any of this to happen. She said she got confused and made a bad decision. Her voice was low and shaky. I listened without interrupting. She said I was the one who lied first, hiding my gaming career for 2 years. She said it made her feel like she couldn't trust me. She said if I had been honest from the beginning, none of this would have happened. I felt my jaw tighten. I breathed and told her I was wrong for lying about gaming. I said I did it because I was afraid she would leave me if she knew the truth. I said that didn't excuse what I did, but it explained it. Then I said her cheating and wearing another man's shirt to publicly humiliate me wasn't the same thing. She looked away and shook her head. She said I was making it sound worse than it was. She said it was just once and she never thought I would find out. She said she never meant to hurt me. I asked about the guy in the audience who said she was dating him at a previous tournament. Her face went pale. She said that was different and complicated. She said he was lying to get attention. I didn't believe her. We kept going in circles for almost an hour. She kept minimizing what she did and throwing it back at me. I kept trying to explain the difference between my lie and her betrayal. Nothing was getting through. Other customers glanced over at us occasionally. We were keeping our voices low, but the tension was obvious. Finally, I said we needed to separate for a while. She asked what that meant. I said it meant I needed space to figure out what I wanted. I said I couldn't just pretend this didn't happen. She started crying. She said I was abandoning her and being cruel. She said I was throwing away our marriage over one mistake. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I told her I would come by the apartment tomorrow to get more of my things. I said she could stay there and I would figure out another place to live. She asked where I was going. I said it wasn't her business. I stood up now and left my coffee untouched on the table. She called after me, but I didn't turn around. I walked back to the apartment alone. The sky had darkened and it looked like it might rain. I let myself in and went straight to the bedroom. I pulled a travel bag from the closet and started filling it with clothes. I grabbed my laptop and charger from the desk. I got my gaming headset and mouse. I moved through the apartment quickly, not letting myself stop to think. In the kitchen, I grabbed my favorite mug and a few other things. Carla's keys were still on the counter next to that canvas bag. I left them there. I took my own key off the keyring and placed it on the counter. The metal made a small clinking sound when it hit the surface. I looked around the apartment one last time. The empty feeling in my chest wasn't exactly sadness. It was just the weight of something ending. I threw the travel bag over my shoulder and left. I locked behind me with the spare key I still had. Then I slid that one under the door. I didn't want any reason to come back here. My phone started buzzing constantly as soon as I got back to Pedro's place. The team group chat was blowing up. I opened it and saw dozens of messages. Pedro asking if I was okay. 2 other teammates discussing whether we needed to make a statement. Someone posted a link to a gaming news site that had already written an article about the tournament incident. The headline called it a dramatic turnaround with personal stakes. I scrolled through the messages feeling overwhelmed. I typed a response saying I wanted to keep personal details private. I asked them not to talk to press or post about it on social media. I said I appreciated the support, but needed to handle this my way. The responses came back quickly. Everyone agreed to stay quiet. Pedro sent a private message asking if I needed anything. I told him I was fine and just needed time. I put my phone down and leaned back on the couch. The ceiling looked the same as last night. I closed my eyes. My phone buzzed again an hour later. I picked it up and saw a DM request on social media from someone named Ray Tillman. I opened it. The message was professional and polite. He said he was a journalist covering the gaming scene and wanted to offer me a chance to tell my side of what happened at the tournament. He said he understood it was a difficult time, but thought it might help to have my perspective out there. He left his email and phone number. I read the message twice. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. Another part wondered if he was right. Maybe getting ahead of the story would help, but I had no energy to deal with it now. I typed a short response saying I appreciated him reaching out, but needed time to process before making any statements. I said I would get in touch if I changed my mind. His response came quick. He said he understood and would respect my privacy. He said he would write something regardless since it was public, but wanted to make sure I knew the door was open. I thanked him and closed the app. That night my phone rang. I saw Beck's name on the screen. Beck was my manager, the guy who handled all the business side of my gaming career. I answered, and he went straight to the point. He said sponsors were asking questions. He said they wanted to know how to handle inquiries from press and fans. He said some were worried about the negative attention. I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't even thought about sponsors. Beck's voice was calm and practical. He said we needed to agree on a holding statement, something brief that would satisfy the companies without going into personal details. He suggested saying I was focused on the team and wouldn't discuss personal matters at this time. I agreed. It sounded professional and simple. We talked for a few more minutes about logistics. Beck said he would send the statement to all relevant parties and handle any follow-up questions. He asked if I was okay. I said I was managing. He told me to call if I needed anything. After we hung up, I felt exhausted. The business side of my personal crisis was overwhelming. I hadn't realized how many people had a stake in my life beyond me and Carla. Around 9 that night, I got a message from an unknown number. I opened it and saw it was from Camila. She was one of our team coaches and someone I'd become friends with over the past year. The message said she heard what happened and wanted to check how I was doing. She said if I needed a place to stay that wasn't Pedro's couch, she had a guest room I could use, no pressure and no deadline. I stared at the message for a long time. The offer felt generous and kind. It also felt embarrassing that I needed help like this. But Pedro's couch wasn't a long-term solution, and I knew it. I messaged back saying I really appreciated the offer and would take her up on it if she was sure. She responded immediately saying she was completely sure and I could move in whenever I wanted. She said she would send me the address. The relief I felt was mixed with shame. I was a grown man who couldn't even keep his own living situation together. But I pushed the shame down and focused on the practical side. Camila's place would give me stability while I figured out everything else. My phone buzzed again before I could put it down. This time it was a message from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it and saw a long message from someone who identified herself as Carla's sister. The text was hostile and angry. She said I had no right to abandon my wife when she needed me most. She said I exposed our dirty laundry in public and humiliated Carla in front of thousands of people. She said I was a coward who couldn't handle one mistake. She said Carla was devastated and it was all my fault. I read the message twice, feeling my anger rise. Carla had already shaped the narrative for her family. She painted herself as the victim and me as the villain. I thought about responding but decided against it. Anything I said would only make things worse. Instead, I blocked the number and deleted the message. The alienation stung more than I expected. I'd always gotten along with Carla's family. Her sister used to invite us over for holidays. Now she was sending me hate messages based on whatever version of events Carla had told her. Another notification appeared before I finally silenced my phone. It was a DM from my rival on the enemy team. I opened it with my jaw tight. The message was surprisingly genuine. He said he wanted to apologize and make clear he had no idea Carla was married. He said she had told him she was single and really liked gaming. He said he felt terrible about the whole situation and understood if I hated him. He said he just wanted me to know he'd also been deceived. I read the message several times. His tone seemed honest. I wanted to be angry at him, but the anger felt misplaced. He was also a victim of Carla's lies just like me, but I brought myself to respond immediately. The whole thing was too complicated and raw. I closed the app without responding and finally turned my phone off completely. I lay back on Pedro's couch and pulled the blanket over me. My mind was still racing, but at least the constant notifications had stopped. The next morning, I woke up early and looked up walk-in clinics nearby. I found one that opened at 8 and offered STD testing without appointments. The drive there felt strange, like I was moving through someone else's life. I parked in the small lot and walked through the front doors into a waiting room with beige walls and outdated magazines. The receptionist handed me a clipboard with forms asking about sexual history and symptoms. I filled everything out mechanically, checking boxes and writing dates. When I handed the forms back, she told me to wait and someone would call me soon. I sat in a plastic chair next to an older man reading the newspaper and a young woman on her phone. Nobody made eye contact. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and I felt exposed sitting there like everyone knew why I was getting tested. A nurse called my name after 20 minutes and led me to a small exam room. She explained the testing process with a calm, professional voice that made me feel slightly less embarrassed. The actual test was quick and clinical. She said results would take 3 to 5 business days, and they would call with the outcome. I thanked her and left, walking back to my car with this strange, empty feeling. The responsible thing was done, but now I had to wait and wonder. Our first scrim since the tournament started at 2 p.m. that afternoon. I logged in early and went through warm-up drills trying to get my head right. My teammates entered the voice channel one by one, keeping the energy light. We loaded into the practice match against a mid-tier team we should have handled easily. But the first round I was off. I missed a call-out about enemy positioning that got Pedro killed. 2 rounds later, I positioned too aggressively and got eliminated early, leaving my team in a bad situation. My aim felt shaky and my decision-making was slow, like I was playing through fog. Pedro covered for me initially, making calls I should have made, but as we fell further behind, I heard frustration creeping into everyone's voices. We lost the first map badly. During the break between maps, nobody said anything directly to me, but the silence felt heavy. I apologized for the bad play and promised to focus better. The second map went slightly better, but we still lost. After the scrim ended, I sat staring at my screen, feeling that old self-doubt creeping back. Maybe I couldn't handle pressure. Maybe the tournament win was just luck. Maybe I would let my team down when it really mattered. Camila private messaged me asking if I could talk after everyone logged off. I stayed in voice channel as my teammates left one by one. When it was just us, she went straight to the point. She said my performance today was concerning and we needed to address what was going on. I admitted I was struggling to focus with everything happening. She listened without interrupting, then told me I needed to establish clear boundaries around my personal situation. She said the team needed me functional, and that meant taking active steps to manage the chaos. We talked about developing a proper plan so I wasn't constantly reacting to online drama. She suggested limiting social media, establishing no contact periods with Carla, and being more structured about separating team time from personal problems. Her tone was direct, but not mean. She acknowledged this was genuinely hard, but made clear I couldn't keep playing like today. The combination of accountability and support helped me feel less like I was drowning. She said she believed in me, but I needed to get my head right. I agreed with everything she suggested and thanked her for being honest. After we logged off, I felt slightly more centered, like I had a plan instead of just chaos. That night, I sat at Camila's kitchen table with my laptop and started drafting a personal statement. I wanted to own my mistake of lying to Carla about gaming without trashing her publicly. The first version was too emotional, full of hurt and anger bleeding through every sentence. I deleted it and started again, focusing on accountability. I wrote about hiding my passion because I feared rejection, acknowledging that lying was wrong regardless of my reasons. I mentioned that relationships require honesty even when the truth is scary. I kept Carla's actions vague, not detailing the cheating or public humiliation. The statement ran 3 paragraphs, trying to find balance between taking responsibility and not throwing myself completely under the bus. I sent it to Beck around midnight, asking him to edit. He responded within an hour with a cleaner, more professional version. He had removed the parts where my pain was too obvious and tightened the language. Reading his edits, I realized how much my hurt had shown through. The final version felt measured and mature, even if it didn't capture everything I was feeling. Beck said it was good to post when I was ready. I posted the statement the next morning on my social media accounts. Within minutes, responses started coming in. Some people were supportive, saying everyone makes mistakes and appreciating my honesty. Others criticized me for lying in the first place, saying I had no right to complain about consequences. Some people defended Carla, suggesting I must have done something to push her away. I read the first 12 comments, then forced myself to close the apps. I knew scrolling through responses would only make me feel worse. Gave criticism and second-guessing every word I'd written. The vulnerability hangover hit hard as I questioned the whole statement. Maybe I'd said too much. Maybe I hadn't said enough. Maybe I should have stayed quiet. Beck messaged saying the statement was getting good traction and most responses were reasonable. I thanked him, but didn't open social media again. The exposure of having my personal business out there felt raw and uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, Carla posted a vague story on her social media. I saw it because someone screenshot it and sent it to Pedro, who showed me. Her post implied we'd both lied and hurt each other equally, painting the situation as mutual mistakes instead of her betrayal. She didn't mention specifics, but the tone suggested I was as guilty as her. Her friends immediately flooded the comments with supportive messages that subtly attacked me. They called her strong and brave. They said she deserved better. They implied I was controlling or neglectful. I felt irritation rise as I read the comments. The narrative she was building completely ignored what really happened, but I resisted the urge to retaliate or correct the record publicly. Getting into a social media war would only make everything worse. I handed Pedro's phone back and said I wasn't going to engage. He nodded approval, saying it was the smart move. Still, it bothered me that she was rewriting history and people believed her version. The next day, our landlord emailed asking about the lease. He wanted to know if we were both staying or if someone was moving out since the lease was up for renewal in 2 months. The email was polite but practical, asking us to inform him of our plans so he could prepare accordingly. Reading it made the administrative reality of separation hit me. We had to figure out deposits, utilities, who was taking which furniture, all the boring logistics of undoing a shared life. I forwarded the email to Carla with a brief message saying I'd already moved out and asking her to handle the lease situation. I suggested she could keep the apartment if she wanted, or we could both leave and let the landlord find new tenants. I kept the tone neutral and professional, not wanting to start another fight. She didn't respond immediately, which was probably for the best. 2 days later, I went back to the apartment with Pedro to get more of my things. I texted Carla beforehand saying I was coming and asking her not to be there. She didn't respond, but her car wasn't in the parking lot when we arrived. I unlocked and walked into what used to be my home. The apartment felt different somehow, like Carla had been stressed living in chaos. Her things were scattered everywhere. Dishes piled in the sink, clothes draped over furniture, empty takeout containers on the coffee table. Pedro stayed near the door while I moved through the rooms, packing things into boxes. I grabbed my gaming equipment first, wrapping monitors carefully and organizing cables. Then I packed clothes, books, random personal items that were mine. The quiet pain of packing pieces of my life settled over me as I worked. Every item I packed felt like admitting the relationship was really over. Pedro helped me carry boxes to the car without saying much. We made 3 trips total. When the car was loaded, I took one last look around the apartment. Then I locked the door and left the key on the kitchen counter. That night, I booked an intake appointment with Justina Ellis, a therapist the team program covered for player mental health. The first available slot was in 3 days. When the appointment came, I drove to her office in a professional building downtown. The waiting room had comfortable chairs and calming art on the walls. Justina came out to greet me promptly. She was probably in her 40s with an easy manner that put me somewhat at ease. We sat in her office and she asked me to explain what brought me in. I told the whole story, starting with lying about gaming and ending with the tournament disaster. She listened carefully, making occasional notes, but mostly just paying attention. When I finished, I admitted I didn't know how to process any of this. She nodded and said that was completely normal given what I'd been through. Instead of diving into deep analysis, she focused on immediate coping strategies. We talked about breathing exercises, ways to manage intrusive thoughts, and how to separate work performance from personal chaos. She gave me practical tools I could use right away. The session felt helpful without being overwhelming. The next morning, team leadership called a meeting. It was me, the team manager, and 2 people from org leadership. They were professional but direct about setting clear performance expectations. They mentioned my recent poor play and said they understood I was dealing with personal issues, but the team needed consistent performance. One of them brought up possible benching if my play didn't stabilize, framing it as a necessary option to protect the team's competitive standing. The message was delivered without hostility, but the stakes were obvious. My career depended on pulling myself together. I committed to doing better, outlining the steps I was taking with therapy and practice routines. They seemed satisfied with my response, but made clear they would be watching my performance closely. After the meeting ended, I sat in my car for a few minutes processing the pressure. Then I drove to the practice facility, determined to prove I could handle this. The next scrim session started 2 days later, and I sat in my gaming chair focusing on the breathing technique Justina had shown me. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. My hands felt steadier on mouse and keyboard. As I loaded into the practice match, the first round started, and I forced myself to make clear callouts instead of staying quiet. I spotted an enemy flanking left and immediately shouted, my voice coming through the headset without the usual hesitation. My positioning felt more deliberate as I held the angle Pedro needed me to cover. We won the first round, and I felt a small spark of something that wasn't shame or panic. The second round went smoother as I traded kills efficiently, and rotated when my team needed support. In the third round, Pedro gave me a quick nod between plays, and that tiny acknowledgement felt huge. We finished the scrim with a decent performance, and while I wasn't back at my peak level, I had actually functioned as a real teammate instead of dead weight. Leaving the practice facility that night, the small victory of basic competence settled in my chest and reminded me I hadn't lost everything.